welcome to The Joys of Binge Reading, the show for anyone who ever got to the end of a great book and wanted to read the next instalment. We talk to successful series authors and recommend the best in mystery, suspense, historical and romance series, so you'll never have to be without a book you can't put down. You'll find episode show notes, a free ebook, and lots more information at thejoysofbingereading.com. But now, here's our show. Hello, I'm Jenny Wheeler, journalist and historical mystery writer, and today I'm talking to Hannah Dennison. Hannah's Honeychurch Hall mystery series is set in a crumbling Devon estate with poverty-stricken aristocrats, and it's been described as Downton Abbey meets Midsomer Murders. I think it could just as readily have been called Midsomer Murders meets Antiques Roadshow, but whatever TV show you liken it to, Honeychurch Hall is for those who enjoy secret chambers, hidden treasures, very distinctly English eccentric aristocrats, mysteries harking back to the English Civil War, and of course our guys were on the side of the King, King Charles, and inevitably murder. But before we hear from Hannah, just a reminder that the show notes for this episode are available at the website thejoysofbingereading.com/Hannah D. That's Hannah with an H at the end, Hannah. That's where you'll find links to Hannah's website, a free ebook, and information on how to subscribe to future episodes of this podcast if you decide you don't want to miss out. But now, let's talk to Hannah Dennison. Hello there, Hannah, and welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us. In your Honeychurch Hall series, you bring a fresh vibe to the nostalgia around the disappearing world of stately homes. Tell me, was there once upon a time moment when you as a young girl or a young woman became aware of vanishing history?
Very much so, yes. My sister and I, we grew up in the ruins, amongst the shadow of the ruins of Old Basing House in Hampshire. And Old Basing House was like one of the last strongholds during the English Civil War in the 17th century. And as kids, we were allowed to play inside the ruins, in the secret passageways under the ground and climb up the turrets, which of course you can't do anything like that now. And that sort of sparked my fascination for old buildings and a vanishing history, actually, which has stayed with me forever. I'm a great supporter of the Society for the Preservation of Ancient Buildings and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. It comes through very strongly in your books, and your heroine, of course, the former TV host Kat Stanton, worked on an antiques TV show. She's also got a crazy mum, a Barbara Cartland-like mum. I wonder, what do you like best about those two key characters?
Well, of course, I think when you're a writer that you're in part of every single character that you write, whether or not it's a villain or a victim or something. With Kat Stanford, she actually is based very much on my daughter, who is nothing like me. She's extremely sensible, very, very grounded, and I wish I was more like her. So I enjoy writing Kat for that reason. And then with the mother character, there's always been a part of me that wished I was as wild and reckless as Iris, who is the Barbara Cartland romance writer type. I've always wanted to write crazy things, but at the same time, I think being a writer, you're absolutely able to live out your fantasies in your characters. Writers are very odd people, actually. I think we have a touch of schizophrenia about us, with all our different characters all the time.
Yes, and your own life certainly seems to me to have been pretty adventurous. You've done a lot of really interesting things, but we'll get on to that in a while. Honeychurch Hall's young heir, Harold Rupert, who's one day going to be the 16th Earl of Grenville, has got this passion for Biggles, the fictional World War I ace pilot, which is slightly weird. He runs around the place pretending to be Biggles, and everyone is expected to play along. I wonder, where did that spring from?
Well, full disclosure here. Originally, I wanted a young boy that was going to be a little bit quirky, and actually, originally was going to be like a Spider-Man character. Because one of my daughter's young friends, when he was like 7, I don't think I ever saw him out of a Spider-Man costume. I never saw his face for like 2 years till he grew out of it. But then my friend, Claire Langley Hawthorne, who's also a writer, she writes historical mysteries. She has twin boys, and she said, do something like Biggles. That's much more exciting and more fun, because her sons were completely into Biggles. And I just thought that was just a little bit more different. And as it turned out, there are all these books about it, and he existed. And I really like the whole flying aspect, because, of course, when we talk a bit more about what I've done, is I've always been obsessed with aeroplanes. So that was part of the reason that Biggles came about.
Oh, that's interesting. I must admit I didn't know Biggles was real. I thought he was a fictional character, so that shows my ignorance.
No, well, I didn't either. It was in the Daily Mail, my big go-to newspaper. I know there's cries of horror, I'm sure, when they hear that. But there was a whole thing that they did actually show that Biggles did exist. I'm not sure whether his name was Biggles. I'll have to look into it. But I have the article. It was very interesting.
It's fascinating that he's still of interest to young boys today. It's really quite interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I guess it's the whole hero thing, being a hero and stuff like that.
Devon has featured in your other mystery series as well, the Vicky Hill mysteries, about a bumbling young female reporter. What attracts you to Devon in particular, and sleepy village settings in general?
Well, I think I moved to Devon when I was like 18. And Devon is in the southwest of England. So if you're looking at the map, it's where that look like a shoe, where there's Cornwall beyond that. And if you are all watching Poldark right now, there's that whole Cornwall thing going. The southwest is it's very different from the rest of the country, and it tends to be about 50 years behind the times. And so I quite like the slow pace of life. But more than anything, what really attracts me is the small communities of where you will set a mystery. Because instead of being like serial killer comes to a big city, sort of mysteries and murder take place where usually everyone knows everybody else. And I think you can become much more connected to the story. I think mysteries are more like solving the puzzle than the actual murder, the graphic violence of it all. And that's always appealed to me, is the undercurrent of relationships in a small community. And Devon is completely perfect for that environment.
Agatha Christie also has quite a connection with Devon, doesn't she? Talking about puzzle mysteries.
Yes, she does. Actually, she has Greenway, which is the summer home that she used to, it's now open actually with the National Trust. And my mom, who's now 88, she has been a docent there since it opened. The countryside, the beauty, the coastline. Some of her books, like And Then There Were None, were set on Burr Island. And so it's been really, really interesting that Agatha Christie picked that spot too.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and good on your mum.
Yes, yeah, she's quite well. The bad side is, of course, whenever I'm stuck on a book, she'll say, well, Agatha would do this and Agatha would do that, because she knows everything about Agatha Christie. So it's helpful sometimes, yeah.
Have you read much of Agatha Christie yourself?
I have, and she's just so amazing. And also, I've read her autobiography, if some people haven't, and she had a tremendous sense of humor, which sometimes doesn't come across in some of her books. But she actually was quite a very amusing woman. She had a very dry sense of humor. So I do love her books, and I study them, but I can never figure it out till like really way down the line. She's just like the queen of mystery.
Yes, there's one that was published just recently, a novel about what happened during that mysterious time when she disappeared. Andrew someone, I can't remember his surname right now, but that was quite an interesting read.
Oh, I'd love to read that. I have not read that, and that definitely would appeal to me, very much so.
Yeah. Look, what do readers tell you they like most about your Honeychurch stories? What do you think the appeal of that kind of story is?
I think they like the setting, which is often a character in itself, the whole country house thing. But most people, if they do like the books, have said it's more about the dynamic between mother and daughter, because that's quite a special bond. And also the fact that often those people closest to us, we actually really don't know them at all. And that's always been fascinating to me as well. You think you know somebody. I mean, my mother only recently told me that she used to belong to a nudist colony. And I thought, oh my God, she's telling me now, and she's 88. So sort of like, I would never have thought that of my mom, but, sort of crazy stuff like that.
Yes, it is pretty amazing, really. And the dynamic between them is great, as you say. It's something that keeps the book turning over very nicely. Look, turning from your writing to a little bit about your own world and life, your biography reveals that you've done a lot of very interesting things, including working for a Formula One world champion at one stage, and then script writing or script development in Hollywood. But there's one encounter that you mentioned that I just love to hear more about, and that's the story about how you met Steven Spielberg and the role that he played in getting you started as an author. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. It was amazing because at the time he was not as famous as he is now. Now it's like there's 5 assistants and you have to even get through to him. But at the time, I was working as a flight attendant on the corporate jet that was doing the location scouting for the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade movie. And I had an option to either fly Prince Charles or Steven Spielberg, but at the time, Harrison Ford was included in the Steven Spielberg deal. Could not turn that down for a minute, obviously. And so I spent like a month with Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford, just like being on location and just taking care of them. And it was during a long flight home that we started to talk about my dreams. And he was saying, because I had a daughter, I was a single mother at the time. And he said, are you planning on doing this all your life? Because I really love flying. It was a real joy to me. And I said, well, I've always wanted to be a writer. And he started to sort of like make me really think about it. And he said, you have to take a leap of faith, because there's a scene in Indiana Jones where his father's about to die, and the only way he can get across to him is across this huge chasm, but there's no bridge. And it's a very iconic scene where Indy takes a step over the side of the cliff and a bridge magically appears. And I know this sounds crazy, but I started thinking about this and about what I really, really wanted to do. And all sorts of odd sorts of things started to happen that kind of got me to Los Angeles and working in Hollywood and learning how to write. And it was more like he was such an inspiration to me, because not many people probably know this, but when he decided he wanted to be a film director, he just set up a caravan, like a van, a porta cabin thing, on the lot of Universal Studios, on the back lot actually. And he just had the gumption just to put it there and start operating as a movie person, even though he wasn't really supposed to be there. Of course, now you can't do that sort of thing because of security. But he was just a huge inspiration about, if you're really passionate and you really want to do something and you show the universe that you're willing, that the most extraordinary things happen. And so I did all that. And then about 10 years later, or it may have been 7 years later, actually, I forget, he won some Academy Awards for Schindler's List. And I actually wrote to him and said, I don't know if you remember me, but I took your advice and now I'm working for New Line Cinema. And he replied, it was a wonderful letter. And he said, again, you took that leap of faith. And, he said, I just really happy that it worked out for you. And it was just great. And I keep that letter in my wallet, because he said, never forget the passion that you felt that got you here. And, sometimes it's been quite hard being a writer, but I get my little letter out and I remember. So there you are. That's a long story. Sorry.
No, it's just a fabulous story. It's a sort of spine-tingling sort of story. And obviously, your bridge did appear. So you went to Hollywood. Tell us about, were you script developing, or that must have been a huge leap. That would have been a very big bridge across a chasm.
Well, it was funny. Things never work out how you expect. And I think it's really important to always be open and not think that because it's not what you want it to be, it's sometimes a different way into something that you want. And how I got there was just random. It was someone asked if I wanted to work on the reception desk in at a movie studio, answering the phone. And I said yes, because I was on this kind of leap of faith. I just got to get to LA, But my dad was going, oh my God, you're actually moving to America with your daughter to answer the phone. This is terrible. But once I got to LA, which was obviously there were more complications than you have time for now, I was probably answering the phone for about maybe 2 months, and then I immediately got into international sales and marketing. But from that point, I learned everything I could about screenwriting. I read hundreds of scripts, and that's the great thing about America, is that if you really, really work hard, you can get places. And so that's how it just all seemed to fall into place after that. But that leap was pretty scary, me with my two little cats in there carrying baskets on a one-way ticket with my daughter. I don't know, I was crazy, but there you are. I'm glad it worked out all right.
How old was she at that point?
She was 10.
She
was 10. Yeah, so it was pretty hard for her because it's an American school is very different from her English private school, where everyone's very correct. And the American school system is very much encouraging you to have opinions and things like that. So it was been quite a good learning experience for her, which has done her well, actually.
Yeah. Now, there was another question. I must admit, I saw it on one of the websites where you were answering questions from readers, but I thought it was such a good question that I was going to steal it, and that was, what mystery in your own life could be a plot for a book? Well,
as you gave me the hint there, I did work for Robert Maxwell, who was the newspaper tycoon who vanished, or was he pushed over the side of his boat? Was he murdered over the side of his boat? We don't really know. But I did work for him for about a few weeks while his regular flight attendant was on vacation. And that was a very, very interesting experience at the time, because we were also going back and forth over to the Eastern Bloc, because the wall wasn't down at that time. So there was a lot of political intrigue that was going on and surrounding that time period before his death. And so I think I probably could do something like that, because I've always been very interested in political intrigue, actually, because I was in Russia for a while, or the Soviet Union, I guess it was called then, right? Or was it? I forget. But in our hotel, for example, I was talking to another flight attendant, and I said, I'm so cold, I must go and get a blanket. And the next minute, there was a tap on the door, and this woman was standing there with a blanket. So all our rooms were bugged. It was just very interesting, an interesting time. So I probably could write something around that.
Do you have any impulse to do that?
I have a list of stories. I've had quite a lot of adventures when I was flying, actually. But at the time, it's weird because you just don't realize until you start rereading diaries, because I've kept diaries ever since I was 14, or journals, if you like. And I think, oh, yeah, I could write something about that. So maybe I could do a collection of, the adventures of, or something. Something like that would be fun.
Might lend itself to another series. You never know.
Yeah, exactly, which would be fun. I still keep in touch with all my flight people,
Yes. Turning back a moment to Honeychurch, if you were going to organise a literary magical mystery tour for your series, where would you advise people to go? Have you got a must-see list of stately homes?
Definitely. Obviously, Highclere Castle, which is where Downton Abbey was filmed, which is, I think that's in Newbury, actually, near London. And Lady Carnarvon, if you have any Downton Abbey fans, Lady Carnarvon, who is the chatelaine of Highclere, has this incredible blog post that she does. And so you should definitely take a look at her blog. And she really kind of opens up her life of what it's like to be running this enormous stately home. You can get married there. I don't know who has recently. I don't think it was George Clooney, but anyway. And then I really love Petworth. And Petworth is in Sussex. And Petworth House is fabulous because if you're, again, interested in upstairs, downstairs, they have all the amazing servants' quarters with a tunnel that leads under the house to the, I think actually to get from the kitchens to the dining room area, the maidservants, they had to actually go under a tunnel to get there because the house is so huge. And they have, I think it was even in the upstairs, downstairs original series where you had the two different, actually I know what it was. It was Gosford Park, if anyone saw that movie called Gosford Park, where they had the two different dining halls, servants' dining halls. One was for the kitchen staff and one was for the butler and upper house parlourmaids and stuff. And so Petworth is definitely a must. I know we mentioned Greenway earlier, which is a much smaller house, but just all about Agatha Christie. And then going back to my history passion, I would say Hever Castle, which again is in Kent. And I love this castle because it's where Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's very unfortunate wife who lost her head, she grew up there. And it's an adorable castle with a moat, and it's very small and just like a fairy tale castle. So those will be my must-see locations.
How do you spell Hever? Is it Hiver?
Oh, it's Hever.
Oh, right. Okay, lovely, thank you. Just so that people can Google it and find it. I'm sure if they put in Anne Boleyn, they'd find it pretty well straight away. That's great to hear because they are very individualistic selections. You don't sort of just plop for Chatsworth or some of the ones that are very, very famous. That's really great to hear.
I think there's much in these, they're lived in still by usually maybe a family member might have a wing, or you get that sense that sometimes with some of the National Trust properties, they will take over a house, which is great, because they can then run it. But then some of the furniture is taken from someone else's National Trust house, so they sort of share the furniture around kind of thing. Whereas like with Hever, I'm almost positive that everything there is as it was when Anne Boleyn was there.
Yes, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that is appealing about series reads generally, especially ones that have a historical aspect, that the setting, as you say, is part of the story. And when you get attached to that setting, you really have got a feeling that you'd love to go there and just walk around and imagine yourself back in that time. And so is there anything else that you think has helped build this passion that people have developed for reading series of books rather than just standalone titles?
I think you're absolutely right what you were saying, that a lot of people get really invested in the characters. And so they know what they're going to expect when they open a series book. They feel it's almost like watching a soap opera in a way, that you get really attached to the story and the characters and their loves and their passions. And I feel that is the appeal of a series. Because, I didn't actually set out to write a series. My very first book was a standalone. And they said, can you make this into a series? And I honestly hadn't thought about that. And then I realized how much I love writing series because you get just really attached. It's like you go off into their world. It's almost like the show Doc Martin that's set in Port Isaac in Cornwall. That's another sort of feeling where all the characters there. A Midsomer Murders, those sorts of things. That I think has a great appeal to readers.
Yes, absolutely. Perhaps now turning to you as a reader, and whether I don't know whether you ever have binge read, but that's the question. Do you yourself find that you like to read in series and that you have in the past been a binge reader or are today?
Absolutely. I do find it harder now when I'm writing on a deadline to have time to read in between, because I can only read non-fiction when I'm actually writing fiction, which is strange. But when I was younger, I read Dick Francis, like every single book he ever wrote when I was a teenager. And then my biggest binge reading sort of was the Diana Gabaldon books, which I'm not sure if we called it cross stitch here, but I think it's called Outlander, and I know it's on television now. But she would write these huge 700-page books, and I would binge read all her books. There were like 5 or 6 in the series. And again, for the same reason, because I knew I wanted to be attached to these characters. It makes you very unsociable, actually, I think, when you're binge reading, because you just want everyone to leave you alone.
I think it's probably the Netflix phenomenon as well, and it's obvious from what you've been saying that you also do watch a lot of TV and movies, that you're very much aware of what's being shown on screens.
Yes, I love watching. I love watching TV because the quality of television now is incredible, especially like Netflix original series and things like that, and HBO. And my husband and I, he's a writer too, and so we love talking about the story. And in a way, it sort of spoils it because I'm never able to be completely entertained. I'm always like looking at what decisions they've made to write that story, and then when there is a story that just blows me away, I'm thinking, oh my God, I wish I could be that writer on that show, or why didn't I think of those things? It's great. I like it a lot.
Yeah. If you had is there a current series that you're reading at the moment? And if so, what is it? What would you recommend for people right now?
The only thing I read recently, because I've been writing a lot actually, so the only one I've read recently is Rhys Bowen's work. I like her Royal Spiness books. They're really fun because they're the sort of the upper class 1920s Nancy Mitford type things, and I've always enjoyed Rhys's books. That's probably the only one, and Agatha Raisin I like when it comes to comedy and things like that. As I say, a lot of the time, if I'm writing, I read a lot of non-fiction, so which is strange because I don't know why. I think it's a way of switching off my mind, perhaps. So probably that helped, really. Oh, and sometimes, though, I like binge reading, like I'd read a classic, like a Jane Austen or something, completely out of my genre. And I enjoy those, because she's amazingly amusing, actually. So as a more mature reader now, instead of reading it when I was forced to read it at school, and I wonder if some of your listeners would feel the same way, that when you revisit some of the classic novelists that you had read when you were at school, that you have a totally different appreciation as you're older.
Sure. Well, we've had a really interesting introduction to your world, Hannah. And we did touch on it earlier, but I do wonder what you're really working on, what you're thinking about for the next few years, and if we are ever going to see a series from you in a totally contemporary setting that reflects some of your varied life experience, like the world of Formula One racing or executive flying. Have you got anything in mind for the long term in that area?
I have, actually. I mean, right now I've got another new series that I've just literally heard is going to happen, and that's set on the Isle of Scilly. That's much more of a mystery, contemporary mystery about two sisters who inherit an old Art Deco hotel on one of these little tiny islands. And then that will be those cozy mysteries, which, as I mentioned, about everybody knowing everybody else. But the first in that series will come out in 2019. And in the meantime, I'm writing, I have 2 standalones, and one is to do with my flying experience, which has been fun going through all my old journals on that. And then I'm also writing another one, which is to do with a woman that I met, again, on a plane, but it's about she was Russian and had to get out during I can't even pronounce it, Petroyska or whatever it's called.
Yes.
Did I do it right? So I have a little bit more serious subject matter on the standalones. So those, I'd like to write more standalones and then write the mysteries in between, because I like writing the mysteries because they're fun.
Sounds like a great idea for the sisters in the Art Deco Hotel. We'll look for that one with anticipation. At this stage in your career, if you were doing it all again, would you change anything, or is it really just a feeling that it happened just as it was meant to happen?
I think it's sort of, I think you're right. I think sometimes life happens at the time it's supposed to happen, even though we want to push it and we're impatient maybe. But when you look back, it actually did all fall into place at the time that I could handle it, or one can handle it sometimes. But I think if I could rewrite the last 10 years, I should have literally written quicker, more books, and not be so. I think I write far too slowly. I think that's my biggest thing, because as you get older and I start to sort of map out and think, well, how many more years do I have to write? And say 20, and that's pushing it really. And then I realize that some on my list of books that I want to write, I have more than 20. So that's kind of sad, actually. So I'm going to have to get cracking.
How many books a year, to use that phrase, do you manage to get out?
Well, I've only been doing one or two, but really one, actually. Only 1 year did I get 2 out. But I have friends who write 2 or 3. So I just need to get quicker. So if I
Sure.
But it also is practice, because after a while, especially having written screenplays and everything, there is a certain formula to writing a story. And as you get, more practice at it, like anything, it should be quicker, really.
Yes, you probably anticipate the plot turns and things
Exactly.
without even realising you're doing it, yes.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for joining us today, Hannah. I know that book 4 in the Honeychurch series was out just a couple of months ago. It's now generally available, is it? Murderous Mayhem at Honeychurch Hall.
Yes.
And you've got 5 books in the Vicky Hill series as well. Are you still writing Vicky Hill?
And yes, I'm writing a 6th Vicky Hill. And so that's very exciting. So hopefully that will be out next year. And then a 5th Honeychurch Hall. And then this new series. So, and now I feel quite sick thinking about how much I said I was going to write, and now wondering whether I actually can write that much.
I'm sure that you will. But just before we finish, can you tell people where they can find you online?
Yes, very simple. My website is www, which of course everyone knows now. It's hannahdennison.com. Just my name, HANNAH Dennison, DENNISON.com.
And do you do social media?
I do Twitter. I'm really rubbish at Facebook. I'm so embarrassed about it. But I'm rubbish at Facebook, but I do try. But I'm on Twitter, and I also have a newsletter that I send out. Not very often, actually, so you don't get bombarded with like every month or anything like that. But when I have something to say, that will often have contests, and I give away books and English tea and teapots and crazy stuff like that. So, and that's all on my website, a place to sign up.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm sure you'll have people following and getting in touch. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thanks a lot. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Joys of Binge Reading podcast. You can find all the details and links for any episode at the website, thejoysofbingereading.com. We'd love to hear your comments, suggestions you have for who you'd like us to interview next, and if you enjoyed the show, we'd love you to subscribe on iTunes or similar provider. That way you won't miss out on future guests. Thanks for joining us today, and happy reading.